Welcome once again, warriors, to the worst fighting game, my totally pointless quest to find the ultimate and unplayable, unparalleled garbage. During this journey, we've fought early 3D embarrassments, 16-bit slogfests, and 80s PC abominations so cursed that priests run screaming at their mere mention. We're doing something a little different today, though. Among the myriad of ports that have been released throughout the decades for major fighting franchises, few have a veneer as vile and as sticky as Mortal Kombat Advance. A game that IGN famously gave a 2.0, a score that Ed Boon himself commented on in an interview, saying, "Aw, come on now, 2.0 isn't that bad of a score. It's better than 0.0. So, with that setting the stage, let's get Mortal Kombat Advance in the ring. For most, actually nay, all of the 90s, the portable attempts of Mortal Kombat were always a bust, featuring cut characters, washed out colors, and all of the sacrifices you'd expect when shrinking down a big bombastic digitized fighter to the tiny screens of the handhelds of the day. The more realistic renderings of the cast of characters proved to be a bad fit for said portable screens, but Acclaim pushed on despite those ports being bad ideas because, well, that's just how Acclaim was. However, at the turn of the century, when Midway was running the show, it was decided to give portable combat another shot on Nintendo's next big evolution in Game Boying, the Game Boy Advance. At the same time, Midway was also in the middle of shifting away from the declining profits of the arcades and into the booming money pits of home consoles, where they set their internal teams and second-party studios to the task of making them a publishing powerhouse. We all know how that turned out. Regardless, their main Chicago-based team, headed up by Ed Beasy, were busy with the fiery, farting, power-upping, and neck-stretching of Deadly Alliance, so Midway did the next best thing: contract the port out to a studio nobody's ever heard of. That studio being Virtuecraft. I told you you've never heard of them. They were, an emphasis on were, a UK-based outfit that crafted exclusively for the handheld market and were so busy pumping out a huge quantity of ports that they didn't really have all that much time for quality. In just 2000 alone, they released 6 different games. One Wild Thornberry, a Micro Machine, a Croc, and throw an NBA Jam on top of it. Fuck it. They were just as busy the next year with a Dexter's Lab game, some sports titles, and our opponent today, MKA. Now, I gotta get ahead of this. This port is considered by many as one of the worst of all time, and factually, the lowest rated Mortal Kombat. Yes, there might be more unique fighters that could be considered worse, but in terms of adapting an already famous franchise, MKA might be the very bottom of the bloodstained barrel. Now, the GBA was set to have a big launch year, as it was Nintendo's most elaborate hardware refresh in the portable space since ever at that point. Midway, therefore, wanted to get in on the ground floor because, well, everyone did. The original Game Boy did sell 100 million units, and in the early 2000s, GBA titles were cheap as hell to make, but could still be quite profitable. Capcom had multiple Street Fighters on it. Hell, even Tekken, Guilty Gear, and King of Fighters punched their way onto the popular portable. Why do I write like this? There's just so many P's. But now it was Midway's turn. How did they do? Well, you're watching the worst fighting game, so I'll give you 3 guesses. While a lot of work had been done to make Alpha 3 playable on the Advance, and Tekken had to be completely redesigned from the ground up, Midway decided to go the more frugal route. They had Virtuecraft just convert Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3, not the arcade version though, but rather the 16-bit ports. Maybe in an attempt to obfuscate just how cheap and no frills this was all going to be, especially since UMK3 was 6 years old, they decided to make the branding as vague as possible. Hence, Mortal Kombat Advance! Hey kids, there's this new Mortal Kombat. It's advanced. Look at this new logo. Nah, don't look at the back of the box. As for Virtuecraft, well, none of their back catalog can be considered Game of the Year material, but it's clear they must have been under extreme time pressure to ship this thing.
I had a lot of time to prepare this, but I didn't.
Now, it didn't make the GBA's initial launch, but instead limped into stores just in time for the 2001 holiday shopping season, a launch period Midway historically favored. As we'll see, this game is not even borderline, this is straight up broken, is plagued by a litany of bugs and missing features, and has some cuts and decisions that will surely anger up the blood of hardcore and casual MK fans alike. See, Midway felt this was shippable. They were fine with this. One person who was not fine though was Ed Boon, who has gone on record multiple times that he and the core Midway Chicago team were not involved or consulted on this port in any way. Jesus, Elder God Christ, just where are we gonna start with this one? Well, how about in the... So when you boot up MK Advance on your totally legit GBA hardware like I did, you'll be lulled into a sense of security from the menus and select screen. This doesn't look too bad, you think to yourself, but after you take more than 5 seconds squinting real hard, shit starts to fall apart equally as hard. Remember when I said this was built off the 16-bit versions of Ultimate? I believe all handheld MKs up to that point cut at least one character from the roster, but really? Even on a new machine? This grinds my shit, especially when you consider how many characters were jammed into Alpha 3. Rain and Noob are present, however, just like the console versions, but aside from that, there's nothing else about the roster of note. Looking at the combatants a bit closer then reveals even more cracks in the presentation. All ninjas now have the same idle stance. Scorpion, Reptile, Sub-Zero, Ermac, every color of the palette-swapped rainbow now has the same silhouette. Same goes for the women and the cyber ninjas too. That must have saved upwards of 7 to 8 animation frames. Virtuecraft! Now, when you actually start a match, you'll notice that all the sprites hold up okay. They pop against the background, but that's not surprising considering how grainy and washed out they are. Also, any animation these backgrounds did have is no longer present here, but those aren't the only cuts. The subway, the waterfront, the desert, and the Lost Bridge, the big blue portal stage, are now all MIA. I can sort of let all this stuff slide because a handheld conversion is always going to have some small concessions, but what I can't let slide is why the holy Netherrealm do the characters stand so far apart from each other at the start of every round? Just why? Why? It feels so weird because it's the opposite of how every fighting game has worked since ever? You notice it immediately whenever you start a match, and is the first of many basic take-for-granted things that feel wrong about MKA. But what's kind of unexpected here is that the game fares far better in the audio department. Kinda. The announcer, Shao Kahn, sounds crystal clear in every voice sample. Fatality. A stark contrast to the muffled garbage that poured out of his mouth in the console versions. Fatality. Now, while that's great, the kinda I mentioned earlier is that he's still missing a lot of speech. Hell, there's not even round announcements. Fight! Round 1. Fight! Things get a bit shitter with combatant voices. Aside from Liu Kang, all the male characters suffer from this bizarre bug where they will randomly imitate Shiva. Yes, despite not being in the game, they left her voice in for whatever reason. You know, on second thought, this is amazing, actually. I'm loving this. Put this on the front of the box, please. That's the voices, but what about the music? Well, what's here sounds alright, but it lacks the proper transitions to the pre-fatality jingle or or whenever a round ends. It just loops constantly throughout the entire match, giving it more coats of that, oh shit, we're late, come on, let's hurry it up, no time to bug test, paint job that permeates the entire game. Why the music and voice samples are so high quality has to do with Manfred Linzner, a work-for-hire composer/programmer responsible for the audio in other handheld games such as Tony Hawk 2 and Iridium 3D. Big ups to him for one of this game's few positives. What the most shocking thing of all, though, is that every character actually has an ending. I honestly assumed they'd just be cut. Now, they're nothing special because it's just the versus screen art and some text, but that's still pretty... Wait, the versus screen art is here? Where the hell are the actual versus screens? Wait, where's the combat codes? The brutalities, the animalities? Now, if you've played MK3 or UMK3, you know exactly what to expect here, but that's what makes this release oh so terrible. You can run, but there's no run bar. It's a 6-button game, but there's only 2 face buttons, and the ways to finish your opponent have drastic gone down. Meaning, stage fatalities, babalities, brutalities, and animalities are all gone. Damn, that's a lot of alities. It's almost faster to tell you the things they did keep, which I should have led with. Every combatant gets 1 fatality, except for Noob Sabat, who gets nothing.
You get nothing!
And 1 friendship, and that's it. This is way less stuff than the 16-bit console versions, which really makes me start to wonder, what's so advanced about this Mortal Kombat?
Please clap.
The real shitty thing, though, is that 80% of all fatalities, regardless of what they entail, result in the exact same outcome, i.e. a few small chunks of flesh lying on the floor, and sometimes not even that. Certain fatalities don't even display correctly, like Jax's big dumb leg, Cabal's head disappearing for no discernible reason, among tons of other fuck-ups. While I guess these are a slight step up from how fatalities appeared on the Game Boy or Game Gear, they're still butchered to the point where it's just kinda depressing.
I mean, this right here is the epitome of not even trying.
In terms of modes, try to be surprised, but there is not much on offer. Even though this is a 2001 release, there's no training mode, which would have helped considering all the new timings, bugs, and non-functioning special moves you're gonna need to get used to. There's your standard 1-player arcade and a versus option that's either 1-on-1 or 2-on-1, and yeah, who cares? As you can see, this is an extremely bare-bones package that offers way less to do than its console brothers, which would have been fine if this was released in the mid-90s, but again, this was a port of an almost 6-year-old game. Imagine if you were a big MK fan and this was waiting for you under the tree on Xmas morning, and you just had to look up at your idiot parents and go, "Thanks, you idiots." Oh right, one last thing, the combat codes. Yeah, they're gone, and what's more, Mortal Kombat, a series well known for codes and cheats, has 0 on the GBA. If you complete each tower, you do unlock Smoke, Mortaro, and Shao Kahn, but there's still nothing really hidden or new in this port. Couldn't they have thrown in some type of bonus fighter? I don't know, a female chameleon, or like violent striker, or like... Oh wait, here's one! Ketchup from PNDK&M. I felt like you were lurking around here somewhere.
I was! In fact, when I heard your agonized cries from across the realms, the internet, I figured I'd help you review this embarrassing chapter of Mortal Kombat history.
That makes sense. You're a combat fanatic, and you've probably hated this thing for years, right?
Actually, I've never played it before today. When you told me about Mortal Kombat on the Game Boy Advance, I thought you meant Tournament Edition or Deadly Alliance. How wrong I was.
Oh, that means you're the perfect person to describe MKA's game feel, cause I don't wanna.
Oh no, I didn't mean that. Wait! No! Okay, so I'm going to be honest with you. As somebody whose favorite game ever made is Ultimate MK3 on the arcade, I had to make sure that I got a hold of the real physical copy of MK Advance just to make sure that all of my findings were legit and not just a result of buggy emulation or something. Because seriously, this game is so janky that dodgy emulation was my first assumption. But nope, the game is just like that. Everything here is coming from the perspective of someone who spent a lifetime with classic MK, so I'll be looking at this from a bit more of an in-depth point of view, and the game just feels off. Really weird, and it doesn't really play like you'd expect either. You see the run button, block button, the super strange inputs, yet they exist for things like sweep, roundhouse, and uppercut, but there's just something about all of the animations and hit reactions and even the combos that makes it feel like someone tried making MK3 in one of those mid-2000s Flash games and gave up halfway through. It really doesn't help that within less than 10 minutes I already broke Rain. He's got about 3 infinites at least. Look, this lightning strike keeps the AI in block stun infinitely. You can do the same thing with the weather ball, and on hit, this weather ball can infinite if you repeat roundhouse into weather ball over and over again. There's one universal reason all of this works, and that's because moves have pretty much zero recovery. If you perform an attack in any true Mortal Kombat game, or even 99% of fighting games, you have this brief moment of what we call recovery, when a move is finishing up before you can move again and perform something else. MK Advance doesn't seem to have that. The move hits, and whether it's been blocked or hits an opponent, you can instantly move again. On top of that, the special moves are another thing that feels super unusual. This one's hard to explain, but there's usually a certain time frame between inputs to get a special move to come out. Scorpion's Spear is back low punch, right? But you can't go back, low punch and still expect it to work. You've got to be faster than that. Not an MK Advance, apparently, because you see, as long as you've done the inputs for a special move with nothing in between, the move will come out. So when you're looping Rain's lightning over and over again to infinite the AI, you can just press back, and then when the strike hits, just press your punch button. It doesn't matter how much of a gap is left in between inputs, this will always work, which makes the timing of the infinite way easier than it should be. And it's already easy anyway. You can't play the game your standard way, because the lack of move recovery makes the AI play like it's an EVO Grand Finals and their block button's broken. This is how I figured out the lack of recovery in the first place, because AI Scorpion will teleport and instantly do another one over and over again. Kind of feels like you're fighting Scorpion in modern Mortal Kombat, to be honest. Ultimately, you look at the game on first impressions and go, oh, this is like UMK3, right? I grew up playing that on Super Nintendo. This may somewhat look like it, but it isn't. Not even close. If you try and play this game like the UMK3 you remember, it's not gonna work. Characters are missing moves, which doesn't help. I'll use Sector as an example because he's my favorite. In arcade UMK3, he's certainly on the lower end of the tier list, but he's fun. His smart missile is cool and unique. He's got some nice combos from teleport uppercut, especially in the corner, and he can relaunch certain characters in certain situations. In MK Advance, he's straight up missing his homing missile, which is really sad, but I imagine getting it to work might have been difficult, I don't know. His teleport punch only seems to hit when it feels like it, because the hitbox is pretty worthless. So really, with the AI constantly jumping and doing specials over and over again, all you can do is missile and jump kick. Exciting. This was a proper release, right? You spent money on this. It's meant to be Mortal Kombat on the go, but all it really does is look like MK, but not play like MK. If this was all you had during a family holiday or something, you're better off playing with the sand bucket. Trust me. I'm normally able to find some things I like about a game, but not here. Mortal Kombat Advance is a toilet.
So, you liked it then?
No. No, I didn't.
Well, neither did anybody else. Mortal Kombat Advance is one of the worst rated fighting games ever released, even achieving the fabled 0 rating from Dan Shu at EGM, which is a hell of an accomplishment. And, as you'd expect, Virtue Craft lasted only 2 more years, bowing out of the business with a Samurai Jack game I've never heard of. Fortunately though, Midway did learn from the critical thrashing and metric ton of fan ire that MKA garnered, spurring them to release 2 fantastic GBA games modeled after the 3D era, which were supervised by Ed Boon and the main team. Then, on the Nintendo DS, we saw a much improved Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3 arcade port that featured all the missing content, Shiva included, online play, and puzzle combat to boot.
And to be fair, those 3D Game Boy Advance titles, whilst they weren't amazing, they were certainly ambitious for the time.
Ketchup, where can all the warriors at home find you?
Thanks, Matt. You can find me on YouTube over at PNDK&M, where I put out all kinds of content about mostly high-level arcade fighting games. Mostly Mortal Kombat, sometimes Killer Instinct. I did a Primal Rage video recently. Basically, if it's an old fighting game with a competitive following, I have a fascination about it. Thanks for having me. Much love all round.
Superb! As for where this lands in our tier list Hall of Shame, well, honestly, the presentation absolutely saved this one, as all the cut content, poor controls, and game feel have propelled this preposterous port not over, but alongside the other luminaries and the current grandmasters of trash. You've truly chosen your destiny, Mortal Kombat Advance. Thanks again to Ketchup for the guest spot, and if you know of any other fighting games that should enter our ring, let me know in the comments below, or enter the temples of the Flophouse VIP Patreon to cast your vote about the next opponent I'll be squaring off with here on The Worst Fighting Game.